Captain Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Logistics Station Alpha 7, watching the endless stream of cargo ships crawling through the designated lanes like luminous ants. To any other species in the Galactic Coalition, this would have been the picture of efficiency, a perfectly orchestrated dance of supply vessels, following optimal routes calculated by the most advanced AI systems. But Sarah saw only waste. You can't seriously be suggesting we abandon the sacred lanes. First Coordinator Vectral's crystalline form shimmered with agitation, its faceted surfaces reflecting the starlight in sharp, anxious patterns. These routes have been calculated and refined over 3,000 years. That's exactly the problem, Sarah replied, turning to face the assembled alien dignitaries in the station's command center. We've become slaves to optimization. When's the last time anyone actually questioned these routes? The emergency meeting had been called because the Coalition was facing its worst resource crisis in centuries. The Meridian Empire's recent expansion had cut off access to crucial deuterium processing facilities in the Carina sector. Without a steady supply of refined deuterium, half the Coalition's worlds would face energy shortages within months. The sacred lanes represent the mathematically perfect solution, insisted Sub-Commander Zix, their insectoid mandibles clicking in frustration. Any deviation would result in longer transit times and increased fuel consumption. This is basic space-time geometry. Sarah pulled up a holographic display of the current supply routes. Perfect for normal conditions, sure. But these aren't normal conditions. Look here, she highlighted a dense cluster of interconnected lanes. We're still running every ship through the major hubs, even though we're now routing around Meridian space. It's like trying to drive through downtown during rush hour, when you could take the back roads. Back roads. Vectral's crystalline structure clouded in confusion. Human terminology, Zix explained. They persist in using ground transport analogies, despite achieving spaceflight centuries ago. The insectoid turned its compound eyes toward Sarah. But the comparison is flawed. Space lanes are nothing like ground roads. They are carefully plotted to take advantage of gravitational assists, minimize fuel usage, and they're predictable, Sarah interrupted, which is exactly what the Meridians are counting on. They don't need to control all of space to strangle our supply lines. They just need to control the choke points that our own efficiency has created. She manipulated the holographic display, and dozens of new lines appeared, seemingly random paths that wandered between stars with no apparent logic or pattern. The assembled aliens recoiled in horror. This is madness, Vectral vibrated. These routes ignore every principle of efficient space travel. The fuel costs alone would still be less than what we're burning now trying to route everything through the remaining optimal paths, Sarah countered. Yes, each individual ship would use more fuel, but by distributing our cargo vessels across hundreds of inefficient routes, we can move more total material than trying to cram everything through the few perfect lanes we have left. Impossible, Zix declared. Our logistics AIs have run millions of simulations. There is no mathematical solution that performs better than the sacred lanes, even with the current restrictions. Sarah smiled. That's because your AIs are optimizing for the wrong things. They're trying to find the perfect solution to an imperfect problem. Sometimes you have to embrace the chaos. She expanded the holographic display to show the entire sector. Humans learned this lesson centuries ago in our own supply chains. Perfect efficiency creates perfect vulnerability. The strongest systems are the ones with built-in redundancy, flexibility, and yes, even a little waste. And you believe you can coordinate such a chaotic system? Vectral's tone carried equal parts doubt and fascination. We already have the framework in place. The Earth Historical Merchant Marine Guild has been running simulation games based on old Earth naval convoys for centuries. They call it a hobby, but they've basically been training for exactly this scenario. Give me 3 days and a direct link to their headquarters on Earth, and I'll have every independent human cargo captain in the sector ready to run these routes. Independent captains. Zix's antennae twitched in alarm. Without central coordination. With just enough coordination, Sarah corrected. Another human lesson. Too much control from the top makes a system brittle. We'll give them the basic parameters and let them adapt on the fly. Trust me, nothing motivates human cargo captains like the chance to prove the perfect solution wrong. There was a long moment of silence as the alien officials processed this proposal. Finally, Vectral spoke, its crystalline surface now showing bands of deep purple, a sign of resigned acceptance among its species. The Coalition Council will never approve such an unorthodox approach, officially. The first coordinator's surface flickered. However, given the emergency nature of our situation, I suppose we could classify this as a local initiative, a temporary measure only, of course. Sarah's smile widened. Of course, I'll start making calls, and I suggest you all prepare for some very interesting logistics reports over the next few weeks. Human efficiency isn't always pretty, but it gets the job done. As the aliens filed out of the command center, Sarah turned back to the viewport, already mentally plotting the first wave of inefficient routes. The Meridians had based their strategy on the assumption that the Coalition would keep behaving like it always had, predictably, perfectly, optimally. They were about to learn an important lesson about humans. Sometimes the best way to win isn't to play by the rules, but to change the game entirely. 3 weeks after implementing Sarah Chen's chaotic supply chain system, the results were impossible to ignore. The Meridian Empire's intelligence analysts were reportedly in a state of complete confusion. Commander Raxel of the Meridian Border Force slammed his tentacle against the holographic display, causing the image to flicker. This makes no sense. How are they sustaining these shipping volumes? The display showed hundreds of cargo vessels moving through what had previously been considered dead space, regions between the established shipping lanes that no civilized species would use for regular transport. The ships moved in seemingly random patterns, their trajectories defying conventional logistics algorithms. "Sir," his aide reported, "we've intercepted another convoy." But it was empty. Empty. Raxel's color-shifting skin turned a mottled red-gray of frustration. "That's the third one this week. Why are they burning fuel to move empty ships?" But not all the ships were empty. Somehow, despite the Meridian blockade of major transit hubs, Coalition worlds were still receiving their deuterium shipments. The supply hadn't even dropped to crisis levels as predicted. If anything, some worlds were reporting faster delivery times than before. Meanwhile, aboard the independent human cargo ship Thunderchild, Captain Maya Patel was having the time of her life. "Plot me a course through that asteroid field," she commanded her navigator, a young human named Jack who had previously specialized in 20th century submarine warfare simulations. The asteroids. Her Arxian first officer, Ven, chittered nervously. "But the established lanes go around." "Exactly why we're going through," Maya grinned. "Our Meridian friends are watching the lanes. They're not watching the impossible routes." The Thunderchild's hold was packed with refined deuterium, its containment systems humming with energy. On paper, the ship was supposed to be carrying processed foodstuffs to an outer colony. That's what the official manifest showed anyway. "Contact," Jack called out. "Meridian Patrol, bearing 047, range 6 light minutes." "Perfect." Maya's grin grew wider. Time to show them why humans still study submarine tactics. "Take us in, nice and quiet." The Thunderchild's engines shifted to their lowest output setting, barely more than station-keeping thrust. To any long-range sensors, they would look like just another piece of space debris floating through the asteroid field. "Captain," Ven's antennae twitched. "Our efficiency rating for this route is -4,000%. Maya laughed. "Add that to my collection. I'm aiming for -5,000 by the end of the month." Sarah's offering a bonus to whoever can achieve the worst efficiency while still making their deliveries on time. The confused alien officer watched as Maya and Jack guided their ship through the asteroid field, using the larger rocks as sensor shadows. Their path was anything but efficient. They changed direction seemingly at random, sometimes doubling back or spiraling around larger asteroids. "I don't understand," Venn admitted. "How can you navigate like this? There's no pattern, no optimization." "That's where you're wrong," Maya replied, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "There is a pattern. It's just not one an AI would ever come up with. We're not following mathematical efficiency. We're following human intuition, built on centuries of playing hide-and-seek in every medium we could find." The Meridian Patrol passed by, their sensors sweeping the established lanes and finding nothing but legitimate traffic, mostly empty ships following perfect, predictable routes. Once they were clear, Maya ordered full power restored. The Thunderchild shot out of the asteroid field like a cork from a bottle, its trajectory now aimed directly at their destination. "Won't they detect us now?" Venn asked. "Doesn't matter," Jack replied. "By the time they respond, we'll be gone. And they'll never believe we came through the asteroids, so they'll waste time searching the lanes we're supposed to use." Back at Logistics Station Alpha 7, Sarah Chen was reviewing the latest reports with satisfaction. The Meridians had doubled their patrols of the sacred lanes, exactly as predicted. Meanwhile, a steady stream of inefficient human cargo ships was running circles around them. "Fascinating," Vectrol observed, studying the success rates. "But surely they can't maintain this pace. The fuel expenditure alone is still less than what we were wasting trying to route everything through the remaining efficient lanes," Sarah completed the thought. "And here's the beautiful part. Because every ship is taking a different route, the Meridians can't establish any pattern to counter." "And the empty ships?" Sarah's eyes twinkled. "How else do you explain the shipping volume data showing up in their intelligence reports? They're so busy trying to figure out our real supply chain that they can't see it operating right under their noses." "Humans," Vectrol's crystalline surface rippled with what might have been amusement. "You turn inefficiency into an art form." "Efficiency is relative," Sarah replied. "Would you rather have a perfect system that fails under pressure, or an imperfect one that gets the job done no matter what?" As if to emphasize her point, another success report came in. The Thunderchild had made its delivery in record time, logging the worst efficiency rating ever recorded for that route. Sarah made a note to authorize Maya's bonus. After all, sometimes the best way to win wasn't to play perfectly, but to play so imperfectly that your opponent's perfect strategy fell apart. Grand Admiral Zena of the Meridian Empire stood before the Imperial Strategy Council, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with barely contained frustration as she delivered her report. The Coalition's supply situation has not collapsed as projected. Despite controlling all major logistics hubs in the Carina sector, their worlds continue to receive critical resources. Our analysts cannot determine how. The council chamber, a vast sphere of living crystal that reflected each member's thoughts in cascading patterns of light, darkened with collective concern. "Impossible," First Strategist Mex declared, his crystalline form vibrating with certainty. "Our models were perfect. Control the hubs, control the supply lines. 3,000 years of warfare proved this strategy. The humans," Zena said the word like it tasted bitter, "are not following the models." She activated a holographic display showing the movement of Coalition shipping over the past month. It looked like chaos, vessels appearing and disappearing at random, traveling through regions of space that no sane captain would use, varying their routes with no discernible pattern. "We've intercepted dozens of their ships," she continued. "Most are empty or carrying low-priority cargo. Yet somehow high-priority materials are reaching their destinations. Our blockade is like a net full of holes we cannot find." In the darker corners of the chamber, Second Strategist Krell's chitness form shifted. "Perhaps we should consider the human factor more carefully. Their historical records show a remarkable ability to function in chaos." "Their historical records are irrelevant," Mex dismissed. "Space logistics cannot be compared to primitive surface transport." "Can't they?" A new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Yana Lin, the Council's human expert, and currently the only human the Meridians had managed to capture since the crisis began, spoke from her containment field at the center of the chamber. You'd be surprised how much ancient human naval doctrine applies to space warfare. All eyes turned to the small human figure. The Council had brought her in to provide insight, but so far she had offered little beyond cryptic comments and what seemed to be barely suppressed amusement. "Explain," Xena commanded. "Ever heard of the Atlantic convoys? World War II, Earth history?" Yana asked. When she received blank stares, she continued. "Submarine warfare, commerce raiders, convoy tactics. No. How about the Silk Road or the Southeast Asian spice trade? Medieval merchant caravans. Ancient surface transport methods," Mex repeated dismissively, "irrelevant to modern space logistics." "Really?" Yana's smile grew wider. "Because from where I'm standing, you're making the same mistakes the German Navy did in 1942, trying to control the shipping lanes, focusing on choke points, assuming merchant captains will always take the most efficient route." She gestured at the holographic display. "Meanwhile, human captains are treating space like it's the North Atlantic, with your patrols as the U-boats. They're running silent through asteroid fields like submarines using thermal layers. They're varying their routes like merchant caravans avoiding bandits. They're using every trick humans learned in 10,000 years of moving cargo past people trying to stop them." "But the fuel costs," Xena began, "are irrelevant compared to the cost of losing the cargo," Yana interrupted. "Another human lesson. Perfect efficiency is less important than reliable delivery. We learned it one the hard way, over and over throughout our history." The Council chamber erupted in debate, patterns of light and color reflecting the members' agitation. Yana watched with satisfaction as the Meridian leadership struggled to grasp what she knew every human cargo captain understood instinctively. Sometimes the best route was no route at all. In her secure office aboard the Meridian flagship, Xena reviewed Yana's words with growing concern. The humans' explanation had been enlightening, but not in the way the Council assumed. They thought understanding human methodology would help them counter it. Xena was reaching a different conclusion. She pulled up the cargo manifests from their intercepted ships again. Empty vessels, low-priority cargo, seemingly random routes. Her bioluminescence flickered as realization struck. "They're not just moving cargo," she whispered. "They're teaching us to ignore them." At that moment, on the bridge of the independent human cargo ship, Mockingbird, Captain Carlos Rodriguez was explaining a similar concept to his alien crew. "The trick isn't just getting past their patrols," he said, guiding his ship through a series of complex maneuvers that looked like aimless wandering, but actually maintained a perfect sensor shadow behind a nearby gas giant. "The trick is making them think there's nothing worth stopping." "But surely they know we must be transporting the deuterium somehow," his Arxian engineer argued. Carlos grinned. "Sure, but knowing something is happening and being able to stop it are two different things. Right now, they're looking for a pattern, a system they can predict and control. We're giving them exactly what they expect to see: inefficient human chaos. While the real cargo moves through that chaos like fish through turbulent water," his first officer finished, finally understanding. "Exactly. The Meridians made a critical mistake. They assumed that because humans understand efficient logistics, we must rely on them. They never considered that we might choose chaos on purpose." Back in the Council chamber, Yana watched the continuing debate with hidden satisfaction. The Meridians were still trying to solve the wrong problem, looking for a system they could counter rather than accepting that the system itself was the counter. As she had tried to explain, humans had spent most of their history moving cargo through hostile territory. They had learned long ago that sometimes the best defense wasn't a perfect plan, but the ability to function without one. The Meridian Empire was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 months into what historians would later call the Logistics War, the Meridian Empire's perfectly ordered worldview was crumbling. Their attempt to strangle the coalition's supply lines had instead revealed a fundamental weakness in their own understanding of space commerce. On the bridge of the Coalition flagship, Audacity, Fleet Admiral Jessica Wong watched the latest tactical display with a mixture of pride and amusement. The screen showed thousands of cargo ships moving through meridian-controlled space like schools of fish, their patterns seemingly random but somehow coordinated. They still haven't figured it out, have they? Her alien second-in-command, a Talaxian named Vex, observed. They're still trying to, Jessica replied. That's the beauty of it. They're looking for the hidden pattern, the secret system behind our chaos. They can't accept that the chaos is the system. The latest intelligence reports showed the Meridian Empire's military stretched to the breaking point. They had committed more and more ships to patrol duty, trying to intercept Coalition cargo vessels, only to find themselves chasing shadows while the real shipments slipped through their fingers. Report from Captain Chen's logistics station, a communications officer announced. The Meridians just diverted another battle group to commerce interdiction duty. That makes 60% of their fleet now dedicated to trying to stop our shipping. Jessica smiled. And how's our shipping volume? Up 12% from last month, Admiral. The human strategy had evolved beyond mere survival into something the Meridians couldn't have predicted. Weaponized inefficiency. Every empty cargo ship they chased, every false pattern that they tried to analyze, every resource they committed to stopping the Coalition's supposedly chaotic shipping was another victory. Meanwhile, in a nondescript office on Earth, the leaders of the historical Merchant Marine Guild were having the time of their lives. What had started as Sarah Chen's desperate gambit had evolved into the largest real-world application of their beloved historical trading simulations. The Meridians just announced another set of designated shipping corridors. Guild Master Helena Martinez reported to her colleagues, barely containing her laughter. They're trying to force all cargo traffic into predictable routes again. How many ships actually use the corridors? Someone asked. Oh, plenty of ships, Helena grinned, all carrying perfectly legitimate, low-priority cargo. Meanwhile, the good stuff. She gestured to another display showing the real supply routes, a constantly shifting web of seemingly random trajectories. The Guild had become the de facto coordinators of the Coalition's shipping strategy, their centuries of studying historical trade routes and convoy tactics proving invaluable. They didn't direct traffic so much as suggest possibilities, letting individual captains choose their own paths while maintaining just enough coordination to keep the whole system flowing. Back in Meridian space, Captain Maya Patul of the Thunderchild was demonstrating another aspect of the human approach. Her ship was currently running dark, using the magnetic field of a gas giant to mask its signature while a Meridian patrol passed nearby. Picking up their scan patterns, Jack reported from the navigation station. They're using the new predictive algorithm. Maya nodded. The Meridians had finally developed software that tried to predict possible shipping routes based on observed human behavior. It would have been impressive if it hadn't been exactly what the Coalition wanted. Time to add some new behavior to their database, she announced. Plot me a course that makes absolutely no sense. My specialty, Jack grinned, his fingers dancing over the controls. The Thunderchild emerged from its hiding spot and began a series of maneuvers that looked like a drunk honeybee's flight pattern. They burned more fuel in an hour than most ships used in a day, changed direction seemingly at random, and generally behaved in a way that would make any efficiency expert have a nervous breakdown. The Meridian Patrol took the bait, diverting to investigate this strange behavior. Meanwhile, 3 other Coalition cargo ships slipped past their sensor range, taking advantage of the gap in coverage. I don't understand, Ven, the Arxian first officer, admitted. We're teaching them our methods. Won't that help them predict us? That's assuming these are our real methods, Maya explained. Every time they think they've figured out how we operate, we change it up. They're learning to predict what we were doing last week, not what we're doing now. But surely there must be some pattern, some underlying logic to our movements. The only pattern is that there is no fixed pattern, Maya said. Every captain makes their own decisions based on their own experience and instincts. We coordinate just enough to avoid running into each other, but not enough to create any predictable system. Chaos is a ladder, Jack quoted from his station. Exactly, Maya agreed. The more they try to impose order, the more opportunities they create for us to exploit the gaps in their coverage. In her office aboard Logistics Station Alpha 7, Sarah Chen reviewed the latest reports with satisfaction. The Meridians had committed so many resources to stopping coalition shipping that they had weakened their actual military positions. Their perfect efficiency was becoming their perfect vulnerability. They still don't understand, she told Vectral, who had become a regular visitor to her office. They think if they can just find the right algorithm, the right pattern, they can stop us. They can't accept that sometimes the most effective approach is to embrace imperfection. A very human perspective, Vectral observed, its crystalline surface showing patterns of grudging admiration. To turn disorder into advantage, to find strength in apparent weakness. It's not just human, Sarah corrected. It's life. Evolution isn't efficient. Nature isn't optimal. The most successful systems are often the ones that can adapt to chaos rather than trying to eliminate it. As if to emphasize her point, another success report came in. The Thunderchild had completed its latest inefficient delivery, while simultaneously helping 3 other ships slip past Meridian patrols. The Empire's perfect order was being undone by the very chaos they had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the best way to win wasn't to play the game better than your opponent, but to show them that they had been playing the wrong game all along. 1 year after Sarah Chen's chaotic logistics strategy began, the Meridian Empire sued for peace. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because their economy had collapsed under the weight of their own perfect efficiency. In the Grand Conference Chamber of the Galactic Coalition's headquarters, representatives from across known space gathered to witness the formal surrender. But more importantly, they came to learn. Admiral Jessica Wong stood at the podium, addressing the assembled delegates. Behind her, a holographic display showed the transformation of galactic commerce over the past year, from rigid, predictable lanes to a living, breathing network of ever-changing routes. The Meridian War taught us all a valuable lesson, she began. The old ways of thinking about space logistics weren't just inefficient, they were dangerous. By trying to perfect our systems, we had made them brittle. By seeking absolute optimization, we had created absolute vulnerability. In the audience, Sarah Chen sat next to Vectral, watching various alien species struggle with this new paradigm. Some got it faster than others. The Arctians, with their hive mind background, understood the beauty of emergent order from chaos. The crystalline Tractarians found it more difficult to accept. But how can we plan? A Meridian representative asked during the question period. How can we predict shipping volumes, coordinate fleet movements, maintain schedules? You're still thinking in terms of control, Sarah replied, standing to address the question. The new system doesn't eliminate planning. It makes planning more resilient. Instead of trying to control every variable, we create frameworks that can adapt to change. She gestured to a section of the display, showing the historical Merchant Marine Guild's coordination network. Look at how Earth's ancient trading networks operated. They didn't have perfect information or central control, but they moved goods across continents reliably for thousands of years. They succeeded not despite their inefficiencies, but because of them. The redundancy, the apparent waste, the unpredictability. These aren't bugs in the system, Jessica added. They're features. They're what make the system robust. In orbit above the coalition capital, Maya Patel watched the proceedings from the Thunderchild's mess hall. Her crew, now a mix of humans and aliens who had learned to embrace the new way of doing things, gathered around the view screen. They're still trying to systematize it, Jack observed with amusement. Look at the Meridians taking notes. They think they can turn this into another perfect process. Let them try, Maya replied. The beauty of our approach is that it works even when people know how it works. Actually, it works better when they know. because then they waste time looking for patterns that don't exist. Back in the conference chamber, the discussion had turned to implementation. Various worlds and species were already adopting elements of the human approach, mixing them with their own traditions to create new hybrid systems. The key, Sarah explained to a group of interested delegates, is understanding that efficiency isn't always about minimizing waste. Sometimes it's about maximizing adaptability. The most efficient system is the one that keeps working when everything goes wrong. Like human immune systems, a Talaxian medical officer noted, redundant, seemingly wasteful, but incredibly resilient. Exactly, Sarah smiled. We're not just moving cargo anymore. We're creating living supply networks that can heal themselves, adapt to damage, and evolve to meet new challenges. In her private chambers, Dr. Yana Lin, now released from Meridian custody and serving as a consultant on the transition team, was explaining a similar concept to former Grand Admiral Zena. Your empire fell not because our strategy was superior, Yana said, but because you couldn't let go of the idea of superiority itself. You kept trying to perfect an imperfect universe. And humans don't try to perfect it. Zena asked, her bioluminescence showing genuine curiosity. Oh, we try, Yana laughed. We just learned the hard way that perfection is the enemy of success. We learned to work with chaos instead of against it. As the conference concluded, new trade agreements were signed, and a new era of galactic commerce began. The sacred lanes wouldn't disappear entirely. They would remain as main thoroughfares, like highways alongside countless smaller roads and paths. But the real change was in how species across the galaxy thought about efficiency, order, and control. The human gift to galactic civilization wasn't just a new way of moving cargo, it was a new way of thinking about problems. The universe is chaos, Sarah told Vectral as they watched ships departing the capital, each choosing its own unique path through the stars. We didn't succeed by imposing order on that chaos. We succeeded by teaching everyone to swim in it. Vectral's crystalline surface showed patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as understanding. Perhaps, the alien mused, that is why your species survived to reach the stars. Not because you mastered the universe, but because we never tried to. Sarah completed the thought. We just learned to dance with it. Above them, the Thunder Child departed on another run, its course as unpredictable as ever. But now, instead of being seen as primitive or inefficient, its seeming chaos was recognized for what it really was, the mark of a system so advanced it didn't need to prove its sophistication. Sometimes, after all, the most elegant solution was simply to embrace the mess.